Hello everyone, welcome back to Edubbey Global Solution. In our previous class, we discussed what is known as living standards. Now today we'll be discussing what is known as poverty. What do we mean by poverty? Here, poverty can be defined as the state of not having enough money to meet the basic needs by an individual in an economic, that is ability to meet with the individual needs, and it is also known as lack of shelter. Now we move to the next slide. Moving to the next slide, we have one past question related to the statement about poverty. What do we mean by poverty? According to our definition earlier, let us check out this option. Absolute poverty occurs when income falls below what is needed for survival. Relative poverty is measured by the same goods and services in all countries. It is impossible for relative poverty to rise as absolute poverty falls, and an advanced economy is likely to have a higher level of absolute poverty than relative poverty. According to our definition of poverty, a poverty that is when there is no money to meet the basic need. That is, this is the statement that is correct about it, is inside your past question. That is when income falls below what is needed for survival. Now we move to the next slide. Moving to the next slide, we now want to discuss about what is known as absolute and relative poverty. What do we mean by absolute poverty and what do we mean by relative poverty? Of course, absolute poverty is a condition where people's income is too low to enable them to meet their basic need. That is, the basic needs like food, water, education, healthcare, and what? And shelter. That is, it is measured by the number of people living below a certain income threshold. Now we have relative poverty. That is a condition where people are poor in comparison to others in the world, in the country. That is the condition of having fewer resources than others in the same society. Now we have the picture differentiating relative poverty here and absolute poverty. Now we move to the next slide. Moving to the next slide, we want to see one past question that is saying something about absolute and relative poverty that we just said earlier. The richest 60% of the population of a high income economy received an increase in income. The income of the rest of the population did not change. What happened to absolute and relative poverty? Now absolute poverty is the main poverty, that is where the income is below the basic need, and the relative poverty is just what? A condition of having fewer resources than others in the same country, in the same society, in the same geographical area. Now what could happen to absolute poverty when the rest of the population did not change, and the relative poverty will be what? The relative poverty should be increased, of course, when the richest of the population is high income. They receive increase in income, and the income of the rest of the population did not change. Of course, the absolute poverty will remain constant while the relative poverty will increase. Now let us check the option. We have absolute poverty to remain constant here, the relative poverty to be what? Increase. That should be our answer. Now we move to the next slide. Moving to the next slide, we now have the causes of poverty. What do you think can cause poverty? What can result to poverty? What can lead to poverty? We have low educational level. Of course, low educational level means when people are uneducated, they are unskilled, and they are unable to find better jobs. It will keep them in poverty. Poor government support. Of course, poor government support for basic service or basic infrastructure service can also lead to poverty. Also, we have the size of the family. Of course, more family members with only a few people earning can also lead to poverty. And we also have poor health. Of course, ill mental or physical health is also both a cause and can also lead to poverty. We also have unemployment here. Of course, when people are unemployment and have to go without income for a long time, they may end up in selling their possession, and this cause poverty. We have underpopulation. Can underpopulation lead to poverty? Of course, no. Let us check. We are good to go. Now we move to the next slide. We now have the policies to alleviate poverty. That is the policy to overcome poverty. How the government overcome poverty? Introduce measures to reduce unemployment. Of course, government can introduce a lot of measures to what? To reduce unemployment, like expansionary fiscal monetary policy measure that will increase the demand or and increase employment opportunity. And it can also impose progressive taxes, that is the taxes that will benefit the rich more than the poor, that is burden the rich more than the poor. And introduce minimum wages legislation to raise what? To raise wages of low pay employee. And it's to increase the quantity and quality of education. Of course, that should also be the policy to alleviate poverty. And also introducing welfare services for peoples in the society. Now we move to the next slide. We have one last question here also. The government wants to reduce both its budget deficit and the amount of poverty in its country. Which fiscal policy measure is most likely to achieve both of these aim? Fiscal policy. Remember, our fiscal policy is dealing with what? Taxes and government spending. Now we have the options to be increasing the rate of progressive income tax, increasing government spending on welfare benefits, decreasing government spending on welfare benefits, or decreasing the rate of progressive tax. Of course, by increasing the rate of progressive tax, government can reduce the amount of poverty and at the same time the budget deficit. Now we move to the next slide. Moving to the next slide, we also have one last question related to absolute poverty. What is the certain cause of absolute poverty? Of course, we have said this earlier. We have discussed about the causes of poverty. Now we have growing old, insufficient income for basic needs, many dependents in the family, lack of good health care. Of course, the insufficient income for basic need. Now we have another question here also. What could reduce poverty? Of course, we have discussed the policies to reduce poverty here. Now let us check out the options. More regressive taxation, is that so? Greater economic growth, less spending on education, privatization of hospitals. Of course, when there is greater economic growth, that is economic capacity of producing goods, it will reduce poverty. Now we also move to the next slide. There is also past question here. Poverty in household may be defined in a relative terms. Poverty in household may be defined in a relative term. That is, we are dealing with the relative poverty here. What indicates relative poverty? Lack of access to clean water, is that so? Falling below society's expected standard of living, living on less than $2 per day, income level required to make basic need. Of course, relative poverty is what? Having fewer resources than others in the same society. That should be falling below society expected standard of living. Thanks for listening. This will be the end of the class. Stay tuned to our website www.edubbey.com. See you in the next class.